Central China has been hit by an earthquake measuring 7.8 on the Richter scale. 5 children are reported to have died after the tremor brought down buildings at 2 primary schools. 2 powerful aftershocks have also been reported. Well, our environment correspondent Catherine Jacob is here. And Catherine, 7.8 on the Richter scale. This then is a powerful, a significant earthquake.
Yes, it certainly is, Dermot. If you consider that the Richter scale ranges from 0 to 9, obviously 7.8 is fairly high up there. It hit, as you say, in central China, in the province of Sichuan, and it hit about 100 kilometres, or less than 60 miles away from the provincial capital, which is called Chengdu. Now, crucially, it struck Chinese time at around 2:30 in the afternoon, and of course that means that there were lots of people around on the roads, in their offices. Little wonder then that the UN's Global Disaster Alert System has warned that the impact of this could be very high. As you say, we know that at least 4 children are dead and hundreds injured after 2 schools collapsed in central China in Chongqing, which is next to the Sichuan province. Also, the Chinese army have been deployed to try to search for survivors, and the repercussions have been felt far, far away from the epicentre, even as far as Beijing, nearly 1,000 miles away.
I mean, is it an area known for its earthquake activity?
It is. China generally is well used to earthquakes. In fact, there was one in a different province which was about 7.2 on the Richter scale in March. However, you can never tell. It depends on the timing, of course. As we've said, this was early afternoon, and indeed where the epicentre is. This wasn't far indeed from the provincial capital. Lots and lots of people around. As far as Beijing goes, buildings there were said to have tremoured for around 2 minutes, and of course lots of places evacuated, including the headquarters of the Olympic Committee there in Beijing. However, from there anyway, no injuries reported so far.
And it takes a while, doesn't it, for us to hear the full extent of the damage there. How accessible is the region?
Well, it's fairly sparsely populated generally, but the authorities there do say that the Chinese army have been deployed to try to assess the scale of the situation. As you say, in this kind of case, the reports dribble in, don't they? But we do know so far at least 4 children dead after those 2 schools collapsed in the Sichuan province. And the army on their way to try and find out exactly how big a disaster this is.
Another day in the disaster zone, and another extraordinary rescue. At first, only a hand is visible, then a face. This young woman has spent 3 days underground, praying for a miracle, and now it's come. I tried shouting for help, she says, but when none came, I kept quiet to conserve energy. She's escaped death by millimeters, and very slowly she's pulled out. Her eyes are covered as she's blinded by the sunlight. She's one survivor amid the devastation. 3 days in, and some areas are still only just being reached. These are some of the first pictures from Yingxiu at the earthquake's epicenter. China's vast search and rescue operation is in full swing. Here, the only way in is from the air. These paratroopers have been sent in to help with communications. The same method is being used for aid. Here, fresh supplies of water and food are dropped into areas that have been without contact for days. For those that do survive, many, such as 11-year-old Zhang, will carry the scars for life. We were running down the staircase at school, he says, when it collapsed, burying me. He lost his classmates and his arms. Other survivors were more fortunate, such as these British tourists.
You can't describe what it's like. It's just a huge, huge noise and the land shaking underneath you. And the first thing that we all thought to do was to run.
3 days on, and incredible tales continue to emerge. Retired teacher Wang Dexiang was trapped in the rubble of a hospital. It took rescuers 2 painstaking days to free him. He was pulled out to cheers, covered in blood and dust. But for those who will be left behind, those who've lost loved ones, the grief is overwhelming and the damage is permanent.
She lay buried in the dark and filth for nearly 2 days. Her rescuers didn't even know her name. It was hard work getting through the concrete and dirt. This was once a 7-story building. They worked into the night. It took 15 hours, but they brought her out alive. And as she's taken to hospital, they begin to sing. They discover that she spent her 20th birthday under the rubble. But now there's another worry for China. Some of the massive dams which dot this region have been damaged by the earthquake. Troops were sent to patch this one.
The dam has some surface damage and some cracks, which is unavoidable, but I can assure people that the overall situation and structure of the dam is safe.
China had been warned against building this dam in the earthquake zone. If it failed, millions would be flooded. The equivalent of a small army is here now, and the government is sending in 90 more helicopters to help. It estimates that 10 million people have been affected by the earthquake. But the devastation is enormous, and even China is struggling to cope on its own. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Beijing.
There are few comforts here for the badly hurt. Just a sheet of plastic to protect them from the rain. They're left on the road to moan. This woman has back injuries and cannot walk. Remarkably though, no one complains, no one speaks at all. They just wait for hours until the soldiers come and take them away. Most are dazed, confused. Like Gao Shan, he slowly recalls how he received those horrific bruises. I was on a bridge, he told me. I don't know who saved me. This is that bridge. Gao was crossing just as the tremor struck. Along with the concrete and steel, he went crashing to the river below. Everywhere here, the scale of the devastation is sweeping, and amid the rubble, memories of lives before the quake, lives that will never be the same again. The force of the earthquake was so powerful that many homes didn't simply collapse. They were destroyed, smashed into pieces, and in many cases, beneath the pile of wood and brick are the people who once lived here. The focus, say officials, is not on finding the dead, but rather on trying to save the living. But for many of the living, there is only misery. Survivors with nothing and nowhere to go, they huddle together in makeshift tents. It's horrible. There's devastation everywhere. We have no food, this woman says. 13,000 people once lived in this small town, not far from the epicenter of the quake. The local Communist Party secretary, who's been directing the rescue, tells me 3,000 people are still missing. As he shows me the damage to his community, I ask how many have died. He breaks down in tears. Up to 500 have been killed, he says, including his parents, wife, and 2 children. In the midst of his anguish, there's a call over his radio. He's needed again, and goes back to work. John Vos, CNN, Chen Jiaba, China.